right, so let's talk about Tesla's latest event, their latest product, and their latest situation with Plaid Model S and X. So that's the latest is Tesla's Model S and X, their higher end vehicles now have a Plaid version, and they're both essentially getting refreshed entirely. So there's a new long-range Model S, I'll focus on Model S, and a Plaid Model S. Long-range Model S is dual motor, will get about 400 miles of range, and will do 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds, I think. And then Plaid Model S is triple motor, and they have this immense focus on that powertrain and that performance, and it'll do 390 miles, which is pretty dang impressive, and 0 to 60 in 1.99 seconds, asterisk. We'll get to that. So generally, the biggest thing actually here to me is the interior refresh. Yeah. That's like really what happened with this car is there's a new interior. Have you seen it? You've seen the Yoke?
I mean, clearly the Yoke is the biggest thing. It's something we all thought we didn't really think was going to happen. There's definitely been past episodes where we said we didn't think that was going to actually ship with that, but it is. Oh man, what do I think of it? And isn't the other big difference it's the horizontal screen now rather than the vertical screen? I like that a lot. I mean,
there's a bunch of new stuff. I'll just go down the list, honestly, because there's a lot.
Okay.
I think we'll start with the Yoke, right? So I've seen, so they announced the Plaid car originally. Then we got this first deliveries event where they delivered the first 25 of them. So now they're officially out in the wild. It's happening. There's real people driving them. They have the Yoke wheel, and they will continue deliveries from here. So there's a lot of interior changes that match Model 3 and Model Y. They've got the new ventless invisible air conditioner system.
Okay.
They've got the new door handles from Model 3 and Model Y. They've got the wireless chargers up front that are now actually built in right under the screen. And they've switched to a horizontal screen with a new software version. But the one thing that is definitely different and new and catching eyes is the Yoke steering wheel.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know what the Yoke steering wheel is, imagine a steering wheel where you sort of square it up a little bit instead of being a totally round wheel, and then just go ahead and chop the top half of it off. Just take the top half of that square steering wheel and just pop it off, and that yoke that you have left, that's what's going on. Not only that, but there are no stalks on the steering wheel column.
Yeah.
Bigger deal than you think, because that's where your drive selector usually is, switching into reverse or park. That's where your blinkers usually are. That's where your windshield wipers usually are. That's where your autopilot select usually is. That's where your headlights usually are. All of that gone. Now buttons on the steering wheel or controls on the touchscreen. So how do we feel about that?
There's a lot of... How do we feel about these 50 different things? Okay, I'll start with... If I'm just going to go the general Yoke steering wheel, I think it clearly catches eyes. It is clearly a great press photo. It's clearly a great, what car is that? What is that steering wheel when you're walking through a parking lot or something? Awesome. Like, looks really, really cool. Functionality wise, I mean, I don't want to make the biggest judgment without using it, but I cannot see myself enjoying it. Yeah. I think it's going to be very hard to get used to. I mean, there's a reason a wheel has been on a car for so long, because there's so many points of contacts when you're making these big U-turns or K-turns or turning around in a parking lot or something like that. I mean, for example, there's a video posted of a guy he pulls into a parking lot and then tries to make a U-turn to come out. And as he's going like really awkwardly hand over hand to try and make the full 360 turn, he's like hitting the horn button and like all sorts of different things are going on, and it just looks really awkward. So I believe they use Yoke steering wheels for like F1 races, but that makes sense because the amount of turning they're doing, while they're doing a lot of turning, they're not doing like really, really aggressive big turns and like full 180s, 360s, stuff like that. Yeah.
The turns you do on a racetrack are maybe 45 degrees tops, where the turns you do in real life are much more exaggerated.
Very often too. Like you do that all the time.
I was thinking about that as I drove here today, because my natural resting place on the steering wheel is actually typically sort of acceptable for a Yoke. But the second I wanted to do my turns, I realized I moved the wheel between my hands while my hand, I would have been grabbing air basically. And so I'm seeing these videos now of the first ones are out in the wild and there's people driving them. And I'm like, this is classic Tesla of completely ignoring standards because the only reason they're standards is because we've been doing them for so long. The first thing that comes to mind with this is how Model 3 doesn't have a screen behind the steering wheel. Every car anyone's ever owned has had a screen behind the steering wheel or some way of seeing your speed behind the steering wheel, right?
Most of them. My first car ever was a Saturn Ion, and the speedometer was above the radio in the middle. Very similar to where it would be for like a Model 3.
That's hilarious.
It is
now,
really funny.
So the Model 3 puts it over on the right side of your vision. But the only reason that we're all used to the speedometer being like right behind the steering wheel is because that's where we've trained our glance to be. If you're looking at the road, you just train your glance to be right below. You have to leave the road to look at your speed and look back. And I found that the more I drove Model 3 and Model Y for that matter, the more I just trained my glance to be 45 degrees to the right instead of like straight down. So it actually didn't seem that bad. It was just this small learning curve where, fine, Tesla can get away with doing something different because it's fundamentally not that different. And so I'm thinking about this Yoke, like, is this going to be the same thing where I'm just going to get used to the buttons on the wheel? I'm going to get used to my horn and my blinkers and my headlights being buttons on the wheel. Just because there were stocks before doesn't mean they had to be stocks. They're right at your fingertips. Of course, it should be easier. It's faster. And I feel like I'm just going to have to try it to understand. I don't think there's any way for me to watch enough videos to go, oh, here's what the learning curve would be. I think I just have to drive it.
It's way more to get used to. Like glancing over to the right is a much smaller, easier thing to get used to. I also weirdly found it when I used to drive my old car, like being someone who's tall, and if you sit in a position where your steering wheel is at a certain place, if I were to have my speedometer right in front of me, I would block the speedometer with the steering wheel all the time because I'm like looking so hard down.
Not with the Yoke.
Yeah, not with the Yoke. But like the Yoke is so much to change. Like, especially people who have been driving for years, like you just get so used to. I mean, how often do you do the thing where you like, you spin the wheel and then you like have your hand on the wheel and you just kind of loosen it and it spins through your hand. But like at any point you can grab it and now you're ready to go. Like that is literally impossible on the Yoke.
Right. I know a lot of people who do that, and I don't personally do it, but I've seen it a lot.
You have a lame driving instructor because it's the coolest thing to do.
Oh, they hate when you do that though. When you do that,
yeah,
they're like, don't let the wheel open.
I was just making a bad joke.
Yeah, no, they're like, definitely hold the wheel.
Right, you had a strict driving
exactly.
instructor.
I had them do the textbook way, but I feel like the squareness of the wheel would also hurt you sliding it through your hands because it's going to hit an angle.
Yeah. A lot of times I drive with like one hand when I'm like on a big highway that's straight. I have like one hand kind of at the bottom, and I think the fact that the wheel is circular at the bottom, if I'm doing it in the middle, it's very easy to just turn on the point of the axis where it's square on there. I'm sure you can do it, but I feel like it might take a little more force because it's a little less natural to move a square on a circular axis than it is to move a circle on a circular axis.
Right. Yeah, and you can change the steering weight and all that to be sport heavier or comfort if it's a little lighter. But
I would like to try it. I think the buttons are going to be harder to get used to, though.
That's the part that's interesting to me. I think that's going to be the easiest part to get used to. I think that I've gotten so used to driving with stocks that I just know how to go to drive in reverse, and I know how to get my blinkers and my wipers. And I think I'm going to start driving a Plaid Model S and get really used to the buttons, and then going back to a regular car will feel weird because I have to reach further to do all these things where I was doing them on the screen and on the steering wheel before. I think that's just me speculating. Also, wipers, screen. Don't like that. That doesn't seem great.
Yeah. There's too often you have that like in between wipe. That's just like, I don't want this on all the time, but I just need like a single.
I think that's what the button is.
The button's a single wipe?
Yes.
Oh, is it automatic wiper other than that?
I think so.
Okay, maybe that's not as bad. I don't know. I like being able to control things like that. Automatic stuff usually
isn't great.
It's a little finicky, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about the buttons. As someone who's like, I have all my media controls on the steering wheel on my car, and generally if I want to do anything other than like volume up, volume down, I still look at it really quickly. Yeah. And I've had my car for almost 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, you're not using it as much as a blinker. It still feels kind of strange. I also would kind of expect well, obviously this doesn't happen on the stock, but a blinker, left blinker on the left side, right blinker on the right side. Like make it a little easier. Like the most common thing should be the closest to your thumbs on the steering wheel.
So I mean, that's not the way the stocks were.
It's not, but that's just like one finger up, down.
Yeah. I mean, same with the button.
That goes with, I guess.
Technically, I guess. Yeah. It's interesting. It's just going
to
be weird.
Tough.
But yeah, there's just so many instances of Tesla changing little things where like, I guess we've gotten used to it a certain way over time and this is different and it will require a learning curve. But maybe if this is the first car you ever drive, it probably won't be a Plaid
I'm sure
Model
that's
S,
what they're going for is like something along the lines of like people will get used to this and it'll become intuitive. I feel like both of them together is going to be a really steep learning curve for a lot of people. And there's going to be a lot of Model S drivers using their blinkers really poorly or making really bad K-turns on roads.
Yeah, that's the one thing. Okay. So the automatic drive selecting.
Oh, man. Yeah.
This to me is actually probably a little too far.
Like, I think generally all input is error. So we want... If you have to do something that the car could have done already, that should be taken care of. The software should just do it. So you can actually just literally walk up to the car, it senses that you're approaching, unlocks the car based on your phone.
I would have liked to have seen a stock for this. So here's what's supposed to happen. And Elon basically explained it on stage, but says that the Model S and X refresh will guess what you're going to do when you get to stopped and which direction you want to go, forward or reverse. So there are a bunch of instances where it seems very straightforward. I back into a parking spot and I park. When I get into that car, I'm going to go forward,
sure.
Right? Let's say I go forward into a parking spot. There's a barrier in front of me. I get into that car, hit the brakes. It's just going to go in reverse for me because it knows.
I feel like even with this example, you've already hit a snag. Backing into the spot, it's going to guess. Okay.
Yeah. So there are instances where it's pretty obvious what you're going to want to do. If I pull up to if I go to, I was going to say parallel park, but that's another one I don't know what it's going to do. But if I just go pull up to something where there's a wall in front of me and I'm going to make a 3-point turn, I'll pull up to the thing in front of me. It will automatically switch to reverse. I'll back up, and then it'll automatically switch to forward when I stop backing up, and I'll exit that turn without having to touch anything, and it will have just done its job for me.
That's something we're assuming with like curbs on it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So it can see when you pull to a stop, it's like, now you've arrived at something in front of you, we're going to switch you to reverse, and it just does it for you.
Okay.
So there's a couple where it looks like it makes sense, but then there's a question of like, I want to parallel park.
Oh, yeah.
I pull up to a car next to me. I pull up to a stop. Is it going to know I want to parallel park? Will it automatically reverse for me?
Because it still sees a street in front of you.
Yeah, it sees like I just pulled up next to a car like at a stoplight. Why would I want to reverse? Mm-hmm. I'll keep going forward. So I'm going to have to manually switch that, I'm pretty sure. There is auto park on these cars, but there's like a whole bunch of other weird, finicky human guessing situations where I feel like you're just going to have to do it manually. So I've already assumed I'm going to be manually overriding this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So my question was, how easy is the manual override? And it's this like 1-inch wide slot on the left side of the touchscreen. You swipe forward to go to drive, you swipe backward or down to go to reverse, and you hit the corner to go to park. Seems okay, not as good as a stock.
No.
Seems okay. A stock is literally just right there, like just popping into drive, popping into reverse. Everyone knows how to do that. Super easy. And I saw someone in a video sort of demo it like, oh yeah, it just kind of feels like a stock. Like you just flip it up to go forward and flip it down. And then he missed, and then he swiped it halfway and it went back and didn't work. And like he missed the side of the screen, like a whole bunch of questionable misses on the touchscreen there. So
I cannot imagine like parallel parking on a busy like main street is already like if it's busy enough and you have to pull up and then the car behind you can't get past, so it has to sit there and watch you parallel park. I cannot imagine the stress that would be induced by like having to hope this thing guesses. Also, did he use the term guess in the presentation?
I think he did. Yeah.
The last thing I want to
like
hear,
predict.
I would like know. Yeah.
It will
predict.
know.
Like even if yes, it's guessing, don't say guess.
It will decide for you what you want to do.
Like I can't wait till I'm on the road in this 2-ton car guessing what I want to do next.
Something that did get overlooked a lot though was right below the wireless chargers, there are 4 physical buttons. Haptic buttons, I
Okay.
think, where you can switch between drive modes right next to the hazard button.
Is that confirmed?
Yes.
Okay.
So that seems like it may be a more reliable, or at least, I don't know if it's not going to move any more than the thing on the touchscreen, but maybe if you want like a button more often, you'll go to that.
That's the other thing I'm kind of wondering about. Have we like these buttons on the steering wheel? Is there are they like touchscreen-ish buttons, or is there like a physical is enough to where I'm like kind of having some divider that I can feel between these?
So I was worried about this. I was asking about this in my impressions video. They are haptic buttons. They don't click at all.
Yeah, but is there a differentiator before I click the button to know that I am on new button or something like that? Like, are they raised a little bit? Do you know how sometimes though when it's touched, they'll put like a little raised piece in the middle so you can tell like, oh, I'm on the left blinker or the right blinker.
Yeah,
when
they
I
have
slide
that.
my finger over
Yeah,
it.
okay, good point. So they have a little divider between the left blinker and the right blinker, so
Okay.
you know when you're on which blinker. But on the other side, like the difference between your horn and your headlights, you just have to press the right space. You just have to hit the right touch target. You just don't know.
There's going to be a lot of Model S's honking, and you're not going to know if you just messed something up or if someone's just pressing the wrong button on the wheel, or people are going to think Tesla drivers are angry.
Flashing my headlights was just like hitting the stalk, and now it's like hitting the button on and off real quick.
Oh yeah, you have to go.
You got to hit the on off just to flash.
Stop being
not what I wanted.